Please keep them quiet.
Hey, shalom, everybody. Shalom. Welcome to the Way Remnant. I'm Jeff Brannon.
And I'm Miranda Brandon.
Guys, so excited. We've got Dr. Al Garza back in the green room ready to come on. I just have to say, though, on our opening intro, guys, I love that little scene where Aaron Sampson has a little baby and his little hair is just straight up. That reminds me of what I look like in the morning when I get up. So, hallelujah, guys. Good to see everybody tonight. We have a little business to take care of first. We've got from our records here, Al Henry first in comments tonight. Congratulations, Al. Good to see you. Praise y'all. We've got Dane Muna in the background as well. Good to see you, brother Dane. We've got both the Brunsons in the house, under the same house. That's right. Hallelujah. Good to see you. Joe's usually off working and doing stuff. So good to see you, Leno. Praise y'all that you're here tonight. Got Lynn Hobbs all the way from Karnak, Texas, guys. Good to see you, Mom. Good to see you. Hallelujah. Couldn't be the same night without my daughter here. She's also got the wrench by her name, so be careful. Be nice in the comments. She is not afraid to use the band hammer. Hallelujah. But guys, good to see everybody. We want to be real respectful tonight. I know not everybody agrees with everything that we say, and that's okay. We don't probably agree with what you have to say either. So hallelujah. I'm so excited tonight to be able to bring our guest on tonight, and I'm just going to go right on it. So Dr. Garza, very good to see you tonight, brother. Hallelujah. Welcome back to the Way Remnant.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to be back. Good to be back.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, listen, I really enjoyed our talk last time. It was really great, eye-opening to me. I have definitely not studied Hebrew nearly as much as you do and have, but I definitely have studied some Hebrew through the Hebrew University, and the things that you brought out were so eye-opening. And listen, I was a good Berean, brother, and I love you, but I'm not going to take you just because you said it, right? I
Right.
went back and looked at what you had to say. Wow, very impressed. Very well-rounded things that you presented to us tonight. We're going to talk about something that you mentioned in a comment on a reply that I did to something on YouTube. You said, "Hey, you'd like to come on and talk about Psalms 110 verse 1." And man, I got very excited, and without very much hesitation, I said, "How soon can you come on?" And brother, I have to admit, I got so excited, I double booked us. Uh,
Oh,
I
oh
originally
goodness.
had you booked for this coming Wednesday, but like 2 months ago, I had already booked. We have a guest coming on, Catherine Jones, and she's going to be talking about a book that she had, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it until we got done with Sukkot, and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to fess up to Dr. Garza. Hey, would you like to come on this Monday, or would you like to come on next Wednesday? And you're like, man, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah, I was good either way, and I appreciate that because either Wednesday or during the week, I'm pretty open. So my schedule kind of fluctuates, and this was a good week, so that was good.
Well, brother, we're so excited to have you on. I just want to point out to the audience, guys, if you have you want to look up anything that Dr. Garza has, you can go to Dr. Al Garza, Dr. Algarza.info, and you can find all of his stuff. You can find his YouTube channel. He had two channels. You can find both of his YouTube channels there. You can go and find his academia page, which is amazing. You've got a lot of great information out there, all kinds of stuff, and you can even find out about a little bit about your history and stuff.
Yeah.
So, beautiful website. So,
Thank you.
great place. So, what do you have for us tonight, brother? I'm just gonna let you go.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, and what we were talking about earlier is I appreciate the opportunity to share this because when I worked up when I was doing my second master's, I decided to do my thesis. It's a capstone thesis on Psalm 110:1, specifically 1a. The Lord said to my Lord, and
Right.
it's been pointed out that this is the most cited verse in the New Testament, and more than any other verse. And I think it's for a good reason. And it's also one of the ones I think most people misunderstand and don't correctly interpret or translate based on how it was written, from not just from translated from the Greek, but the Aramaic and as well as the Hebrew. So I think it needs to be settled because there's a lot of discussions. Questions that come up are the fundamental questions is nowhere in the Matthew, Mark, or Luke does Jesus ever claim to be God or Yahweh. He just doesn't. So we get illusions that we say, well, in John, we find some places here and there, but none of the Gospels. And I think that's overstated because I think regarding Psalm 110:1 that was cited by Jesus himself to the Pharisees in both Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and those three, I think this really, to me at least, settles that question that he was claiming to be Yahweh directly just by the implication of what he's stating in those passages.
Mm. Yeah, I think this is a fabulous verse to dive into. And we have found, I wrote a book on going through Mark's gospel, and every chapter in Mark alludes to with the scriptures that he quotes out of the Tanakh,
Yeah,
that Yeshua is Yehovah. He
yeah,
makes a distinction with the Father, but at the same time, every chapter, and it's not just once in every chapter, but it's multiple times. And
right,
here you have Psalms 110, and I think you're right. I think this is one of the most quoted verses, not just in the Gospels, but in the entire New Testament,
correct.
out of the Tanakh. And so I am excited for you to open this up. Let's look in the Hebrew. Let's look in the Greek. Let's look in the Aramaic. Let's dive in because Dr. Garza, it's so funny. We have people today that will go in and they will fight against what the original authors were talking about
Yeah,
because it doesn't line up with their modern day theology, and it's very interesting. So I'm excited. I'm going to go and pull your PowerPoint up, brother,
sounds good.
and I will be your click guy. Just tell me when to click, and we'll carry on.
I appreciate that. So, what I'll start with is saying this. You're right. We got individuals who are denying the deity of the Messiah, that he was just a man, just appointed by God to be the Messiah, anointed, all these things, and then they talk about how he was given attributes of God and so forth. But their question is always challenged to a non to Trinitarians and people who believe in Jesus is more than just the Messiah. But they always say, well, where does he ever claim to be God or claim to be Jehovah? Where does he ever make these statements, or where in the Gospel of Mark, Luke, and John? I think that's what this is going to address because again, this to me is a foundation cornerstone passage that Jesus references to prove and to say that he is Jehovah and he's not just the son of David and he's not just a mere man coming from the lineage. So the first verse I put up there is for Jews demand miraculous signs and the Greeks seek for wisdom. Now this is
Mm,
important because for Jews, and this comes between a Jewish mindset versus a Greek mindset. Now, for Jews, they don't dare question God.
right,
If they don't say, "Well, how would you do this? And how did you do that? And how are you?" They don't ask that because if you remember in Scripture, whenever somebody, especially like Job, questioned God, God came down on them. Who are you? Who are you to tell me anything? Were you there when I did this or I did that? Who are you?
right.
So the Jews always look for signs, miracles. That's their proof, so to speak. And then for Greeks, the Greek mindset is seeking wisdom. We want to know how, why, where. We're trying to figure it. If it doesn't make sense in our mind, and this is where I think it separates how the scriptures are written to say this is what it says. And I mentioned this to you last time. This is what it says, without trying to interpret or tell you what its meaning is. Just read the text for what it says, and what it says plain and clearly, you're either going to accept it or reject it. So
Mm,
the Greeks will challenge that. A Greek mindset would like to challenge that. Say, well, no, I need to know how this works and how this works and how. Well, now you're going to the seeking wisdom, which, again, the Jews never did. So when people challenge Jews, wouldn't the Jews believe in Jesus being God or the Messiah being God or this Trinity thing? Well, they didn't have to go and teach it or try and explain it because they just believed it based on God revealing himself. They never said to God, how are you doing this? How are
Right.
you this and how did you? They don't, because again, what happens is you question God. God's going to come down on you, and you see that many times in Scripture
Mm.
where God explains that. So that needs to be understood. So we're going to come to this from a Jewish mindset of understanding what the text is saying. And if you need to clarify, we need to clarify. That's fine. But I'm just going to show you what the text says, and people
Okay.
can decide for themselves if they want to accept it or reject what the text is plainly saying. Um, this is a manuscript that I found of Psalm 110:1, and this is I'll explain this as we move along. But this shows the vowel pointings that's
Mm.
different than the Masoretic text.
Oh wow.
For my Lord or for Adoni, the current Masoretic text, the Leningrad, has to Adoni or to my Lord with
Right.
the Lord Master. This one though uh, comes and says to Adonai, which is the substitute for the name of God.
Interesting.
So this
Right.
manuscript says to, it says, and Yehovah said to Adonai. So this is
Wow.
an interesting text that I found online at the National Library of Israel. It's a full, complete Psalms with vowel pointings, but this vowel pointing does not support or agree with the current Leningrad Codex or the Aleppo, the traditional Jewish understanding.
Can you
So
explain to the audience the difference between in the writing here between Adonai and Adon or Adoni?
yeah,
Because
we're
it's
gonna.
not,
It's gonna
it's
be
real
in the PowerPoint. Yeah, we're gonna cover that distinction when we get in there because I'm gonna show the difference between them. They're without those pointings, they're spelled exactly the same.
wow.
They look the same, they appear the same, but if you just add those dots that come now, remember these come 900 years later, which we're going to talk about after
Right.
Jesus, and based on why did the Jews decide to put Adoni, and we're gonna go over that as well rather than
Interesting.
Adonai. But this one does have Adonai, and we're going to show why the reasons they did that, and it's pretty clear from their own words themselves. So let's go to the next slide. So here we have the Lord said to my Lord. Now this is we're going to look at a couple of things here. We're going to examine, as I mentioned, without the vowel points, with the vowel points, or the nikud, as they're called. We're going to look at the Aramaic Targum that has a different rendering. Now remember, the Targum is more of an explanation. It's like a commentary. They're explaining what the Hebrew's saying. So it's not a word for word. It's more a parallel explanation of the text, and that's what the word Targum means: is to explain. Then we're going to look at the Peshitta, which is a Syriac Aramaic, a version of the Old and New Testament. Of course, we're going to look at the Greek. And we're going to examine how these are understood, not just with the tradition of the languages, but also with how the New Testament represents all three, as well as with the Targum. So we're gonna look at all these in this PowerPoint. So we can go to the next one if you don't have any questions, and feel
There you
free
go.
to ask questions as we go.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is great.
So this is the human question. Jesus asked them. Now he's addressing the Pharisees here because in verse 41 it says, "Now while the Pharisees were gathering together, Jesus asked them a question." Now
Mm.
this is the human question because what do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? And they said to him, the son of David. Now, this is important because this is a question that Jesus is asking them regarding the Messiah. What
Right.
do you think about the Messiah? Now, he obviously is the Messiah. Peter
Hmm.
already confessed, saying, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," and it was affirmed Jesus, the Father, showed that to you. So we know Jesus, in a way, is kind of flipping the script on him. What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he? And so they say the son of David. Now, that is a pretty standard answer for a lot everybody who denies that Jesus is more than just a human, because they say the son of David, son of God, all these things. He's just a man, human form. So this is a standard response. And Jesus taught in the temple, and he said, and this is Mark's cross reference. How can the scribes say that the Messiah is the son of David? This is another question,
Mm.
because the scribes themselves are teaching that the Messiah is the son of David. This is who he is. Now, the wording is slightly different between Matthew and Mark, but the response that Jesus is going to give next is what we're going to look at. So, this is the human question with the human answer. Pharisees are confirming he's the son of David. Let's go to the next slide. Click on. If the Messiah were just a man, then why did he have to correct them? Their answer was correct if the Messiah was just a man and the son of David. No correction was needed. So, we're going to see that Jesus is going to answer
Mm.
them with a correction of saying, then why does, as he did with Mark. Let's go to the next one. What was Jesus trying to tell them about the Messiah? Let's go to the
Mm.
next one. Click. How is it then? This is Jesus' response. After they confirm that he's a son of David from that lineage directly, he says, how is it then that David in the spirit calls him Lord? Then
Mm,
he's going to quote Psalm 110, but he's going to finish with David himself calls him Lord. So, in what sense is he his son? Now, this is Mark and Matthew and Mark combined. Luke pretty much is identical to Mark, so I didn't add Luke, but it reads the
right.
same way as Mark does. So, this is in between the Psalm quote. I focus on this because Jesus didn't say that David in the Spirit calls him my Lord, which would have been more proper if it's looking at from Psalm 110:1. But he
Right.
said David calls him Lord. And if David calls him Lord, in what sense is he his son? So in other words, if he's just the son of David, then how does David refer to the Messiah or call the Messiah Lord in Psalm
Right.
110:1? That is important because, like I said, Jesus did not say my Lord, which would
Mm,
have made more sense if we're looking at the Adoni type of answer. But it says Lord and Lord twice. So we're going to look at that in the Greek right there, as you see, the
okay.
kurion and the Maria. This is important because that is in the, we're going to look at the grammar here, but it's not a big deal. But the Pashita uses Maria, which is important because Maria only stands for the divine name, Yehovah, Yod He Vav He, the Tetragrammaton. That is only used for Maria, especially in the Book of Psalms. So, and the
Wow.
Greek as well. So let's go to the next one.
Can you real quick
Yeah.
again for the audience? Um, I know most of the audience is familiar with the like the Leningrad Codex. Most of the
Mhm.
audience is real familiar with the Greek Septuagint, and of
Right.
course our Greek manuscripts that we have for the New Testament. Can you can you again address what the Peshitta is?
Yeah, actually, I believe it should be coming up in the next segment. That
Oh,
has a definition. So let's move. Yeah. So I'm going to get there because I have that in there.
okay.
So what is Lord in the Book of Psalms? Let's start from here because we're going to talk about the Peshitta and what it is and the importance of it. But the Greek word that is translated of the Jesus' words, and I don't believe Jesus was speaking obviously Greek at that point. I
Right.
don't think he was mentioning it. But the Greek word for kurion equals Yahweh or Yehovah. Always Yehovah in the Book of Psalms. It is,
Right.
remember, the book of Psalms from David, and not all of them written from David, but there's 150, and it's addressed always and spoken of either of Yehovah, Adonai, or Elohim, all referring to the God of Israel.
Okay.
Never does it mention anything else other than those titles in all 150 books. So if you look up the Greek kurion here that Jesus said grammatically, it's always going to be the Tetragrammaton or Yehovah.
Okay.
Always. Not Kiriomu or my Lord or Adoni, as some would say. And,
Interesting.
and we're going to show this because this is important because remember, Jesus is saying according to David in the Spirit. So the entire book of Psalms for the Greek translation is always Yehovah. For kurios, kiriou, we're going to look at all the different variations grammatically. It is
Wow.
never used for anyone else in the entire book of Psalms. So click again.
Okay.
And the Pashita, which is Maria, equals Yehovah, Yod-Heh-Vav, not Mari for my Lord as a human master or for Adonai, my lords. So whenever you see the word Maria, it's always the Tetragrammaton, always referring to
Wow.
Yehovah. Always, especially in the book of Psalms. That is always confirmed. If you get the Pashita, which we'll talk about, look at the book of Psalms. Every time the Tetragrammaton appears as Yehovah, it is always Maria. That is it. And that's what Jesus, the translation in the New Testament that is referring to put the words in Jesus' mouth is Maria, or of course Kurion, which is always Yehovah in the Greek and the
Wow.
Peshitta, always in the Book of Psalms. Next,
I love how you're using these words
yeah,
always. I
always
think
exactly,
we're just trying to be
exactly.
real clear here, right? It's just
I want to
always.
be clear because I know I have people are going to say, well, what about over here? I go, look, Jesus is not talking about anything outside of the book of Psalms and David. So
Yeah.
when we're dealing with what he said, David in the Spirit said, he's referring
Right.
to the Psalms. You've got to know all 150 of how David wrote.
Wow.
And when he didn't, even when he didn't write, it's always this way. It is never any, it is never any different. Like you say, well, these people are called gods or over here. We're not dealing with that because Jesus is making a point here. He's
With
really
David.
making a point with
Wow.
David in the Psalms.
Wow.
Okay, so let's click the next one. So here's the Peshitta, Syriac Aramaic meaning. It means simple, straightforward, or common version. and it's a standard Bible of the Syriac-speaking church. It is written in classical Syriac, a dialect of Middle Aramaic. Old Testament is regarded second to third century. New Testament fourth to fifth century. So it's simply another translation variation. Sometimes people say it's translated from the Greek, or it's a different translation, maybe from a Hebrew text. It just depends what scholar you're dealing with. But this is really second, third century Old Testament. So if I look at the book of Psalms, I'm looking at a second to third century Aramaic text, which regarding Maria, or New Testament, fourth, fifth century. So these were again Syriac, speaking people with the form of Aramaic, and they would translate and interpret this correctly according to how they understood either the Greek or even the Latin or even an earlier Hebrew text source. So this is where we got to understand is that why I'm saying Maria. This is I'm speaking of the Peshitta. When I'm
And
using the Greek, it's the Greek.
this is, oops, I didn't mean
No, go ahead. That's fine.
uh, so the Peshitta, second and third century Old Testament,
Mm-hmm.
that means that this is older than the Masoretic text that we are seeing
Oh yes, of
our
course.
Bible translate, because that's 900 AD versus
Right.
2 to 300, or 1 to 200, and 100
Correct.
to 200, 200 to 300 AD. So that's a difference of about 7 to six
Six,
to seven.
700, yeah, 100
Yeah,
years, yeah, exactly. And even the Septuagint itself is also even earlier, of course. The Leningrad Codex, the Masoretic text, is going to be almost 1,000 years after Jesus, and we're going to see that. So you can keep clicking for more. We're going to look at a couple things. We're going to look at the Hebrew Masoretic text here for my Lord, which is Ladoni. We're going to look at Tukidiomu, which is the Greek. Lamari, Prashita, and of course the Memra for the word in the Targum. We're going to be examining this because this is where we have to understand. We have to, as good Bereans, like you said, and people who are searching out and scholars, we have to examine the languages. We have to examine context. We have to let the text speak for itself. We have to exegete the text, not eisegete. So
right,
what I'm trying to say is this is what the text says, how it always reads. So when I'm saying that, I'm saying that if anybody, like you're saying, anybody can check this out if they have certain
right,
Bible software. They can look. I use Accordance, obviously, and it's more of an academic software. And I'm looking at things, examining, going through Psalm 1:1 all the way down to the last Psalm 150, and I'm trying to find anywhere where these Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew, and even within the Targum, give anything different than what we understand, as I was mentioned before. And that's what we're going to see, that there's no way that Jesus, when he said that David calls him Lord, that he can't be saying anything other than the Tetragrammaton, Yehovah. There's just no way. And then we'll look at Psalm 110:1 is how that relates to that. So let's move forward. So, question is, what is Lord in the book of Psalms? Again, the Greek kurion, which always equals Yehovah, not Kidiomu, my Lord. And if you keep clicking a couple more, I'm gonna give you different variations from. There you go. So we have different in the book of Psalms. Now I'm speaking directly into the book of Psalms because that's what Jesus is referring to. David in the Spirit, speaking in the book of Psalms,
right.
is using this word kurion, which you can see different variations: nominative, the dative, the vocative, the accusative
Mhm.
in the book of Psalms. Every one of these grammatical usages from the Septuagint always equals either Yehovah or Adonai. Even with the prefix to or la on there, you'll find la Yehovah and la Adonai. You'll see Adonai for the vocative, accusative. Now, the accusative is what what they translate Jesus saying as in the accusative form. But this is always used for these in the entire book of Psalm. You'll never see Adoni in there outside of the Psalm 110:1. Never.
And so when we're seeing this in the Greek, we're talking the Septuagint right here,
For
correct?
this one, yes, for the Septuagint. So if we go to the Septuagint and if we have a Hebrew and a Septuagint next to each other and you search out Yehovah, the Tetragrammaton, you're always going to see these variant forms: Kurios, Kurio, Kuri, all these forms for either Yehovah or Adonai. That's it.
Okay,
We also have Elohim, but Jesus wasn't referencing Elohim here. But they do
right.
have Elohim, so all those forms grammatically always associated with that. Now, the Pashita Maria is always the same way. It is always still the same way. Now, click on again. Now, Mari can be used for Adonai and Adoni in the Hebrew Old Testament. Examples of this I point out is Genesis 24:18, with Abraham and Sarah calling him Adoni. Psalm 35:17, Adonai for Mari. So Adoni is found in the book of Psalms outside of 110:1. It was not found. So let me clarify this. Now, if you search for Mari, that term, in the book of Psalms, which is usually rendered, can be rendered for Adoni, you will never find Adoni anywhere in the book of Psalms other than
Mm,
Psalm 110:1, which is by the scribes' own pointings. But even with their pointings, if you look for Adoni outside of that, you'll never find it. Mari is always associated with Adonai in other places in the book of Psalms, pretty much everywhere else. Okay, so you gotta let that sink in here because for Adonai it's found about 50 times and always uses Mari in those cases.
okay.
So my point is this: if you do a serious, honest study and say, okay, let me see where do we find Adoni anywhere else, which is more of the human term, like we saw in Genesis 24, like to Abraham.
Right.
Um, Outside of Psalm 110:1, it doesn't exist.
Mm,
Okay, it doesn't exist, and that's or there's a reason why it doesn't exist and why the scribes decided to add it by the vowel pointings in Psalm 110:1. But you
interesting.
will find, yeah, you will find Mari for Adonai in other places in the whole 150 Psalms, as I mentioned here, about 50 times.
Okay.
So you do find that, which is important because this is going to build the case on why we need to believe that David was not referring to Adoni here, as the scribes want you to believe, but
Right.
he was looking for more Adonai, which is more consistent with the rest of the Psalms and the ones that he wrote. That's important because he deviate from his tradition of writing Adonai and Yehovah for these terms, or did the scribes have another tradition that they were putting into the text when they added those vowel pointings? Does that make sense?
Yeah. 5 to 5, 6, 700 years later.
Right, exact. Almost 1,000 years later, 900 to
Right.
1,000 years later after Jesus. So we're
Yeah.
going to look at that. So this is important to understand. Next one.
All right.
So we have my lords, which is the plural Adonai, and Lord in Hebrew is both, as you see the spelling there in the dark bold, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yod, without the vowel pointings. It can be read as either Adonai or Adoni. Okay,
Right.
that's without the vowel pointings. Now the context and all that's going to determine. So the context that we saw Jesus referring to was not my Lord, but the Tetragrammaton in Hebrew, the Maria, which is again saying Yehovah in Jesus' words, would have been more in context with Adonai, not Adoni. The only way you can make the distinction between Adonai and Adoni, which if you click on, I have it on there,
Okay.
is one Adonai with that highlighted yellow there, the noon,
Right. We got
is
the
with the
commands.
kamatz, yeah, T shape under the second to last Hebrew letter. And if you click again, then we're going to show how the Hirik Yod, or the Hirik, the other one, under the second to last Hebrew letter is like a dot, and that's for Adoni. So unless I put the kamatz or the hirik, you're not going to
Right.
know which one it is. And the context will tell you if you read the context. Now, I believe the scribes, based on their own admission, their own belief on this text, they tell you why they put Adoni, and it's not because they believed it was for the Messiah. What Jesus did was he challenged them with the Tetragrammaton by saying that David in the Spirit calls him Yehovah because that's exactly what David says, I believe, in Psalm is Adonai. And we're going to see that even an earlier church father,
Uh,
during the time that the Masoretic text was put together, he affirms that it originally read Yehovah or Yod Heh before it was changed to Adonai.
so we had a question here, and I just want to, because I want to make sure everybody's following along really good.
Sure.
Uh, when when we read the older manuscripts of Hebrew,
Mhm.
they do not have the vowel pointings,
Correct.
and so what you're saying here, it's just the four consonants,
Mhm.
and what determines the difference between Adonai and Adoni are the Nakud or the vowel pointings, which
Right.
were added later, roughly around 900 AD.
Correct.
And what you're saying here is that we have earlier manuscripts from the Peshitta, which was around the second and third century, that's using Syriac, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
Syriac Aramaic. Right.
Syriac Aramaic, and it was showing a very similar word to Adonai versus Adoni, correct?
Well, it's not a similar. It's the same word Mari, which can be
Hmm.
used for Adonai or Adoni or Adonai. The
Okay.
difference was um, looking at it from the completion of the whole book of Psalms to see was there any other Mari Adonis in there, and there wasn't. It was
Right.
just in this one vowel pointing here in Psalm 110:1, and that's it. Mari in the entire book of Psalms is always equated to Adonai, except of course in Psalm 110:1 when the scribes 1,000 years later decide to change it to Adoni, which is still Mari, but we have to ask ourselves, did the original text really mean Adonai, which is still Mari,
Right.
or did it mean Adoni for Mari? And like I said, it's absent in the entire book of Psalms for Adoni Mari. It doesn't
And
exist for that.
the only difference, I want to make this real clear to the audience, is the difference between a little T shape that's
Hmm.
under or a dot, and
Exactly.
that's it.
That's it. That is the only difference that tells you if it's speaking of God Himself in the plural, my lords, the substitute of the divine name, or a human master lord, as we see with Adoni and we saw in Genesis and so forth. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'll say this here. I did also find manuscripts older or earlier than the Masoretic text of Psalm 110:1. These are fragmented that
Okay.
do not have the vowel pointings. So
Mm,
we don't have it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, Psalm
right.
110:1 is missing in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but people have only looked. Well, if we don't have a Dead Sea Scrolls, we have to look at the Masoretic text and all that. Well, we now have fragments of Psalm 110:1 without the vowel pointing, so people can see that it is spelled exactly the same Hebrew letters, and
Right.
the only way you can determine is if you are looking at it as with those vowel pointings. I do have two manuscripts that I found fragmented of Psalm 110:1 without the vowel pointings that date earlier than the Masoretic text.
Wow. Very
And that I
fascinating.
haven't shown anybody yet because I just recently found those a few weeks ago, and
Nice.
I'm using that for my next PhD dissertation next year. So I'm going to be using that as part of my beta, which I did post actually on Facebook. I apologize, I misspoke. I did put the sections of that on Facebook,
Okay.
announcing that I was actually be working on another PhD. So I'm at Trinity Bible College in graduate school, and I'm focusing on my doctoral dissertation, 4 years on this passage. And I did post snippets of that manuscript of Psalm 110:1 without the vowel points, so people can see what it
Fascinating.
would have looked like at the time of Jesus.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Because again, and I just find this so fascinating, is that in taking Hebrew, we learned that they they had uh, they started forms of vowels
Hmm.
very early,
Correct.
but they were just using some of the consonants in different ways. And then later, around 900 AD, they're like, yeah, this is getting kind of complex. We want to make sure we're preserving how you pronounce and enunciate these words. And
Correct.
that's where they came up with the Nakud, the vowel pointings. And so they're not bad in themselves, but how easy, Dr. Garza, would it be if you had an axe to grind, let's say around 900 AD, you didn't believe that Jesus is Jehovah. You didn't believe that he was the Messiah,
Right.
and you wanted to try to discredit him being God. How easy would it be to take this little thing and instead of putting a little dot, or instead of putting a little T shape under this letter, you put a dot, and
Exactly.
voila, you have now
Eh,
disproven a claim by Yeshua.
exactly. And that is the problem I think most people don't understand, is that we are trying to understand why the what was the Jews, the scribes' motive in doing so. Do they have one, and do they tell us? And they do. We're going to find out because it's
Wow,
not what we think it is. There's a reason why they put that there. Even though you will not find Adoni anywhere else in the entire 150 Psalms, it doesn't exist in there. It's either Adonai, it's either Yehovah or Elohim because it's focusing on the Creator Himself. So you'll never
right,
find Adoni anywhere else in the book of Psalms except for right there.
interesting. Okay,
Yep.
all right.
So let's look at the data for the correct translation interpretation. Adoni outside of Psalm 110:1 is never used or found in the rest of the 150 Psalms. I need to make that clear. It is absent. Okay, it doesn't exist with the little Hirik Yod in there. It doesn't exist. So click it one more time. Adonai is found over 15 times, including the Greek translation to Kiriomu, to my Lord, and the Hebrew Ladonai, to my Lord. Uh, all throughout the book of Psalms, we have them for both. We have even to Yehovah, La Yehovah, for two as well in there. So this is going to help us confirm what one of the Syriac early church fathers at that time said. He said it was originally to Yehovah, which we do find in the text, but I think over 100 times with that prefix with the divine name. If you click again one more time, yeah, to Yehovah is found over 100 times in the book of Psalms. This reflects a possible original wording based on the testimony of a Syriac church father issued out of Mur from the 9th century. Now, this is what his commentary on Matthew, he wrote that in his commentary on Matthew 22, he stated that originally it was a divine name written twice. To Yehovah said to Yehovah, and that it was changed with Adonai to not pronounce the name, so the scribes changed it and it became permanently in the text. So
Wow.
in his estimation, being at that time when the Leningrad was written, being put together, the Masoretic text being put together, to him it was Yehovah, to Yehovah,
Wow.
and both places. That's how he saw it. So this is an early church father, his testimony on the fact, and he says it was changed to Adonai, is what we have in that one manuscript in slide one. And then it became Adoni. He actually mentions it got changed to Adoni even by oral tradition. So
So
um,
roughly 100 years before the Masoretic text comes out,
as it's being copied, actually, probably as it's being written, because it took
right,
quite a while by
right,
multiple. So you got to imagine it's being put together during that time.
okay.
In the 800s into the 9th, 10th century when it becomes completed. So it could have been, he could have been at the time, but he testified that originally uh, Psalm 110:1, it was originally a tetragrammaton on both cases.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, that is fascinating, man. That okay, that's really cool, guys. I look, I'm a Bible nerd, I'm a text nerd, and I am just absolutely loving this, Doctor Garza, because this really this cuts through a lot of opinions. This
Yes.
cuts through a lot of just I'll just say our YouTube scholars out there. So this is very good stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going through this because, like I said, I'm presenting the evidence, the data. I mean, people can look at this themselves. They can decide for themselves how they want to read it. But this is what we know when we look at the data for supporting either Adonai, Adoni, or the Tetragrammaton. We have to look at the data and say, what did Jesus say? How did he
Mm,
say it? And what's he referencing? And how did David write? And what did he mean? Now, the earliest Greek manuscripts we have of Psalm 110:1, the Septuagint, and and even in Matthew 22:44, use of the nomina sacra, the sacred name, shows both the names as divine titles. Adoni is never in the sacred name or the nomina sacra in the Septuagint. Okay, we need to understand that. So the sacred name is simply referring to taking the first and last letters of, let's say, if you want to say kurios, and you take the first letter, the last letter, and you just put those two there. That means it's referring to a divine name or title, like it's referring to Yehovah or to Adonai, or even to Elohim. And this is what we see in one of this is the Septuagint for Psalm 110:1, and you see the yellow highlights
right.
that this is the abbreviation for both Kurios and Kyriou. So you see that the omega there as well, and you see the different letters of the abbreviation. That means that the scribe writing that believed that these were two divine titles of either Yehovah or Adonai, not Adoni. Adoni in the Septuagint is always written out. It is never abbreviated with the sacred name.
Wow,
Never.
that is fascinating.
Yeah.
And
So
this
yeah,
is right from the Septuagint, correct?
right from the Septuagint, the earliest versions we have of this running in early third fourth century, and so like I said, you have the Peshitta earlier than that. This is a sacred name abbreviation of Psalm 110:1, affirming that it is, to them it was never Adoni because it would have never been written in that way. It would have been abbreviated to show either Yehovah or Adonai. This is why we understand. This is why I believe the early church, the church father, the Syriac church father, affirmed that the data with we talked about the Greek word kurios and kurion, all the variations are only used for Yehovah and only used for Adonai. So here we have Matthew 24:43 has the Greek sacred name for Yehovah. then how does David in the Spirit call him Lord? It's abbreviated there. I think if you click on it again, you'll see it, and you'll see again the highlight yellow, uh, the new at the end there with the other letter. We look at the Greek here. We're looking at the abbreviated sacred name, the Kappa Nu. So we look at those two letters. So for Kurion, they abbreviated it for Kappa Nu to show this is a divine title, either Yehovah or Adonai. This is not Adoni. So
Wow.
because Jesus didn't say my Lord, he's using the divine name. Like I said, if you go to the book of Psalms that we just saw, you're only going to find that Greek word used for Yehovah or Adonai only. Okay, so
Wow.
it's not used anywhere else in a consistent manner. So we got to understand this is the evidence that we're looking at the data to say, look, is Jesus calling himself to the scribes as the Messiah, Yehovah, Adonai? And from what we're looking at, it's the only way we can read the text, being honest with it, and looking at even the whole entire book of Psalms, looking how Jesus said it, look how they translated it from every language that we have. So that's got to be considered important. This is data that cannot just be dismissed.
Wow. This is fascinating. And so I hate to keep going back to this,
So no, go ahead.
but this is anywhere from the Septuagint. Some people say they began compiling it around what 150 BC or something like that, and then I know there's different versions of it all the way up up
Yeah,
until the first couple centuries and things. So this is centuries before what we have as the Masoretic text,
correct.
which is what most of our Old Testaments are translated from. Correct?
Correct. From the Vatican Codex or the Vaticanus and the
Hmm.
Sinaiticus, all these different codexes that have the Tetragrammaton that have Psalm 110:1 in them, the
Right.
ones that do so they predate obviously the Masoretic text. So these are
Wow.
but we can understand these were believers in Yeshua. This is what they
Yeah,
believed. The Masoretics were not believers in Yeshua.
that's
They
right.
were not believers. They were not messianic Jewish believers. So they obviously are going to have a different understanding of how
Right.
it should be read and why they're going to put it. And a lot of messianic Jewish scholars in Israel, they will tell you that from their studies and their research on this, that the Talmud and all these things are being put together in response to Christianity, to
Yep.
response to Messianic Judaism, and so they're writing against them and doing these changes.
Yeah, I agree
So
with that.
so here we have another one where it's Yehovah said to his Memrah, sit at my right hand. The divine presence of Yehovah is at your right hand. This is in the Aramaic Targum, and we're going to cross references with First Kings 2. But the Aramaic Targum says that he's speaking to his word, to his Memrah,
Mm.
to sit at his right hand. And then it says in verse 5, the divine presence of Yehovah is at your right hand. That's verse 5. Now, verse
Wow.
5 has Adonai is at your right hand, which
Interesting.
again, Adonai reflects back to verse 1, if we read it correctly. But here in the Targum, which is it's explaining the Hebrew. If you go back, hold on, go back one more time.
Sorry.
No problem. Which is verse 5, but we're gonna go. I want to go back to the other one. Yeah. So the Targum explains that verse 5, which is Adonai, says the divine presence of Yehovah is at your right hand. So the
Mm.
Adonai is the divine presence of Yehovah who's at the right hand. That's the explanation of the Targum. So it's important because here he's speaking to his word. Now we know who the word is all throughout, from John's gospel to the first letter of
Right.
John, the Old Testament. We know that the Memra, the word, the Logos, the Devad is what John 1:1 is telling us. Now you can go ahead.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah. So here we have Psalm 110:5 affirms the divine name of Yehovah or Adonai in verse 1 by using the Greek, again, the sacred name, the nomen sacra Adonai in the Hebrew, and Yehovah in the Aramaic Targum. The Lord is at your right hand, or Yehovah is at
Mm.
your right hand. This is how we understand. This is, again, putting the pieces together, looking at the bigger picture. And here we have the Greek with the sacred name, the kappa with the sacred name and Adonai in yellow, and of course the in the Targum the divine presence of which is the Yehovah is at your right hand. So
Wow.
so these are the different variations showing this is not an Adoni. This cannot be a human
Right.
master or lord. So again, we have to understand that this is what we're looking at, and we have to see that this is consistent with the rest of Psalms, with the languages behind it, and even how the Christian writers and even to some point the Jewish targums and all that they confirm all this.
brother, I'm telling you, when you really break this down and look at it, especially now looking at verse 5 compared it to verse 1, there's just no question about it.
Yeah,
Wow, and I can't wait to get into your thoughts on why these things have been changed. But this is making a very, I just want to say, an airtight case.
yeah,
If you go back and look at the languages, and just see what they're putting again, and the targums, those were, can you just throw that out?
yeah. The Targums are an explanation. They're like a commentary, what we would call a commentary today. They're explaining what the Hebrew is trying to say. It's a very loose type of translation, but
Yeah,
even the word Targum itself, which is found in the Hebrew Bible, I have another PowerPoint that deals with. It's found that it means to explain. That's how it's translated. The Targum
right.
mean to explain something. So it's trying to explain what the Hebrew means. So it's kind of giving you a commentary in translation as a loose one. So that's what the Targum is.
Gotcha. And these the targums were written roughly around what
Well,
year?
there's an oral Targum during the time of Jesus that Paul was even references into
Right.
Timothy's letter. So there's an oral tradition to that would have been now whether there's one written down that's debatable. It comes later on that we have targums being composed in the right before the Middle Ages or the medieval period,
Okay.
early on. But oral tradition, when we look at Paul, he actually orally references the Targum tradition of Exodus, which is
Hmm.
found in our current Targums that we have. So we know there was a tradition being passed down regarding how to understand certain passages in the Hebrew.
And you believe, I believe as well, but you believe that John was referencing this in John 1:1, talking about that Yeshua was the Memra. He was the Word.
Yeah,
And this wasn't a
well,
brand new concept,
yeah,
right?
I believe that was in the mind of John dealing with the
Hmm.
Vater. Now, the early church father that we mentioned, the issue that emerged, the Syriac Hebrew, Syriac Aramaic, and he comments on both the Hebrew and the Syriac. He said John. He actually references John as having the Hebrew Bereshit versus the Aramaic.
Okay.
So he cites that John wrote his in Hebrew,
Hmm.
but with in mind, of course, of what we understand from the Vater and the Memra,
Right.
the Jewish tradition of the explanation, or what we would know as a commentary.
Wow.
So it's kind of both.
Okay.
Definitely would have been in John's mind, even writing it in Hebrew, reflecting back to how they understood the Devad or the Memra being used as Yehovah himself.
Very good. I just want to be real accurate with this because,
Sure.
brother, what I have found is that sometimes when we talk, uh, people will grab a little bit of something and they'll just take off with it in a certain
Right.
direction, and they'll leave the reality of of the facts, and
Right.
that's and I think that's why we have like over 40,000 denominations in Christianity as well. So I hate to kind of keep going back over some of these things, but I want
Well,
people to understand the significance and how this is just locking everything together
right.
with this Psalms 110. It's amazing.
Now, when you said that brought me in mind. See, this is where people will say, untrained, and I gotta say untrained, people who are
Hmm.
not trained in academia or in the languages. So if they'll look at Jesus' words when he said David in the Spirit called the Messiah Kurion, which is the root word for kurios, they'll
Right.
say, well, that word just could mean Lord and Master, and it could mean this, so it doesn't really, and they take a definition of a word and they try to use that to define the
Hmm.
meaning or the context. Rather than looking at why Jesus said it and going to the book of Psalms and say, do we find that in the book of Psalms? Is that word used for
Mm.
Adoni as Lord and Master for human? Because he's citing David, and if you don't go to David himself in the Psalms to see where you find that Greek word, it's only used for the Tetragrammaton or Adonai. So
Wow.
Jesus is literally saying that the Messiah, David called the Messiah Yehovah or Adonai, most likely Yehovah, because that's where it's found in that specific case. But it can go either way. Never for Adoni. That's the point. So he could not have said Adoni, my Lord, because it's a singular form of kurios, not my Lord.
Wow. Very good. Very good. Okay. So why
Adoni.
Adoni? Okay.
Correct, Adonim. The scribe, 900 years after Jesus, was following Jewish tradition. Jewish tradition said that Psalm 110:1 was about either Abraham or David, a human master or Lord. They did not originally affirm the
Mhm.
Messiah in Psalm 110:1. And I put this in my master's thesis, affirming that they, in the earliest tradition within the Talmud, talking earlier to different rabbis, affirming that either they believed it was speaking of David or Abraham, or that it's referring to even Hezekiah at some point. They did not hold the messianic tradition of that text early on. Now later on, a few hundred years later, they started to say, well, maybe it's about David or Abraham and the Messiah, or David and the Messiah. It could be, but earliest tradition to refute the Christians was to this is about Hezekiah or David or Abraham. Therefore, it is Adoni, not the Messiah.
Right.
Now that's important because if you believe that it is Adoni, that means you're gonna believe the Jewish tradition that's either going to be speaking of David or Abraham or Hezekiah and not the Messiah. That makes Jesus a liar.
Wow.
That
Because
makes him
they,
say you
yeah,
cannot hold to Adoni because the tradition of why they put Adoni is what you have to accept. The
right.
reason behind it. If you reject the reason, well, I don't believe it's David, Abraham, I believe it's the Messiah, then you have to go with Adonai or Yehovah because that's what Jesus was saying in reference
Wow.
to himself as the Messiah. Because
Wow.
they are telling you we're putting Adoni because we don't believe it's about the Messiah. We think it's either David, Abraham, or Hezekiah, and it could be a combination of other things. And so if you reject that, then you reject Adoni. You can't have it both ways.
I like how you put that you can't have it both ways. I've been running across some different messianic believers, brother, that are very excited to see, an idea of Yeshua all the way throughout, being spoken of
Mm-hmm.
Tanakh in the Old Testament. But I have seen some people today, brother, that will go as far as saying, well, Mark says this about him. Here we see Matthew saying this about him. I don't think I believe Mark and Matthew anymore. And it's the
Yeah,
craziest thing, brother. And it's just
right.
people will do theological gymnastics to get around what is stated plainly in the text. So very good.
Exactly. And they do that. And I got to say, I've come across people that way. From my last PowerPoint with you when I went to First Kings 19, talking about the word
Mm,
speaking to Elijah and then told him to go stand before Yehovah while he was passing. Remember, I told you the two
yeah,
distinctions were being made there? I've
right.
had to this day non Trinitarians, Unitarians trying to tell me when I asked them, what does that mean? If it doesn't mean they're distinct and there's a distinction being made there, what does it mean? Their explanation is, well, he was telling him to go stand before himself somewhere else. I'm like, and have the same conversation, literally
Wow.
word for word.
He
You mean,
forgot. He's got
yeah,
really bad short-term memory.
he tells Elijah, "What are you doing here?" Exactly. He's
Yeah,
schizophrenia. He doesn't know who he is. He tells Elijah, "What are you doing here?" And then he tells him again, "What are you doing here?" After he tells him to go stand before myself, we're gonna have the same conversation. This is
wow.
what you. This is the logic of someone who
Yeah,
doesn't want to accept what the text is saying,
yeah.
and they have to be very creative to twist that and say, "Well, the only explanation is he's talking. He's talking about himself again to go stand before himself." I mean, my
Mm,
jaw dropped. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? That is your die on the hill when you can't admit the text is clearly making a distinction between the
uh,
word and Yehovah, even at that point. So I hear you because they will
yeah,
reject what the text is saying clearly without interpretation. And I was telling them, I'm not interpreting it. Here's what it says.
with the
Tell me
text.
what it means.
Yeah.
And they did. That's what they're. And then they told me, you're interpreting. You're interpreting. I go, I'm not. This is just what the text is saying, word for word read it, and if that doesn't show distinction grammatically, syntactically, contextually, then I don't know what does.
Wow.
So they'll fight tooth and nail on that, but
Wow.
yeah.
All right, brother. All
Okay.
right. So what do we know about Psalms 110:1?
All right, so let's go to recap. Jesus affirms the Messiah is Yehovah and not just a man. That's clear from day.
Mm,
All three languages, Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, also affirm the Messiah is Yehovah Adonai in Psalm 110:1, based on the languages of the Maria, Mari for Adonai, for the nomen of sacred name and the text of the Septuagint, and even in the whole entire Hebrew of Psalms, only Adonai, Yehovah, and Elohim are used in conjunction for the God of Israel all throughout 150 Psalms. Never is Adoni mentioned except when the scribes decided to make it so by
in the
adding the
Masoretic.
Nikud because they wanted to affirm Abraham or David or even Hezekiah as it's speaking about. So
Wow.
they do not affirm the Messiah at that point. Therefore, it has to be rejected. But I think if you click on have a third one, an early Exterior Church Father also affirms that Psalm 110:1 originally read Yehovah and was changed to Adonai. And that's important because he was there just before it was completed or before it was completed and put down. You have the Aleppo and oral traditions and other texts, but he affirms that his position was that it was originally Yehovah, then to Adonai, and then changed later to Adoni.
That is fascinating. So originally it read Yehovah said to Yehovah.
Right, La Yehovah, and we find. Remember,
Right.
we find in Psalms La Yehovah over 100 times. We
Wow.
find La Adonai, a number of times, including in the Greek to Kidiomu or Kidiomu in there, exactly how it reads in the Greek, without
Wow.
the nomen secula.
Wow. Very
Yeah.
good. Very good.
And then nowhere in the book of Psalms do we find Adoni outside of Psalm 110:1. Only Yehovah and Adonai. For those kurios, kirio, kurio, all the different variation forms of the grammatical structure, whether it's in the dative, in the accusative, or the vocative, it's all, or the nominative, it's all for either one of those two throughout the whole 150 Psalms. Never for Adonai outside of 110:1, if you want to believe the scribes. So it's a consistent theme of David to speak of the God of Israel as Adonai, Yehovah, and Elohim all throughout the Psalms, specifically with the kurios root word for Adonai and Yehovah in the Greek, always.
Wow.
So we have this consistent thing. We've got to say the data does not support Adoni in that one place because the Jewish scribe decided to put a vowel point that changes it.
Yeah. He changed the kamat to a dot.
Yep,
The
to the
P to
Hieroglyph.
a
Yep,
dot. That's the only difference.
to the
That's
Hierik, yeah, to the Hierik for taking to not putting a kamatz because they don't want to make it a divine title,
right.
and opposing the Christians' view that this is the messianic text spoken by Jesus. As Yehovah, they change it to make it Lord or Master,
Wow. Wow.
and then the
Powerful.
meaning behind it. So Abraham, Isaac, or Abraham, David, or Hezekiah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Let's see. Here we go.
Finally, the Jewish scribes added the vowel points to read Adoni because of Jewish tradition. That's clear. They admit it, they say it, and if you reject the Jewish tradition of it not being about the Messiah, then you can't accept Adoni. That's just the way. Well, you can't, like I said, that's the only conclusion. Then you're only left with Adonai or Yehovah. Period.
So you're saying that if you're agreeing with the Adoni, then you are agreeing with the
Reason
point
why? The meaning behind it.
that Yeshua is not the Messiah. He's not.
Exactly.
He's just a man,
And
right?
well, not even just a man that verse doesn't even apply to the Messiah. It's speaking about somebody else, either David,
Wow.
Abraham, or Hezekiah. So if you agree with that, Adoni, you're agreeing with the reason why, and it's not about the Messiah according to those scribes.
And when Yeshua is talking about that verse, talking about him, now you're making him out to be a liar.
Exactly, because he said one David
Wow.
in the spirit calls him Yehovah.
Yeah.
The term there, not my Lord, and then he cites the passage to support it, either Adonai or Yehovah. And then the scribes were silent; they didn't say a word. If that's the next thing that happened, because it says they were silent. They did not answer him. It says then that day on they did not ask him another question. So that's why
Wow.
I'm saying if it was Adoni, which is put in 900 to 1,000 years later, they tell you we only put that because it wasn't about the Messiah. It's either Abraham, David, or Hezekiah. So if you reject that, then you cannot have Adoni. You can't. There's just
Just
no
even
way.
just even the context from what was going on in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, every time that he would pronounce who he was in this fashion,
Right.
uh, they got very upset at him, and they wouldn't have got upset at him if he had said Adoni.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he'd be right. They said the son of David. Correct. Adoni. Or if
Right.
he would have said my Lord, and he didn't. He
Yeah.
says Kurion, what the Greek translation, but that would have been Maria in the Aramaic, which we do have, which is
Yeah.
Yehovah, and translated into Hebrew, Yehovah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's what we have. So that's got to be understood because if when someone asks you, where does Jesus claim to be Yahweh or Yehovah or God in any of the Gospels outside of John? Well, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, right there, you find them in Matthew 22. You find in Mark, Luke, the same occurrence. If you do what I just showed you here, that's what he's telling the scribes, that he is Yehovah, and that's
That's
what David
fascinating.
said.
Yeah, like again, when I wrote my book on Mark, these are Mark is making allusions and quoting from the
Mhm.
Tanakh and showing different things. This is outright saying it.
Right,
To
exactly.
outright saying it. Wow.
and he
I
but he's using David as his source. So it's
Yeah.
not Jesus saying, "Well, I'm Yehovah," or I,
Right.
no, he's
Right.
saying David said, David
Who did
called
David
him
say?
Yehovah. So
Yeah.
how can he be the son of David if David is confirming that he is Yehovah in Psalm 110:1? That is the
Exactly.
point. So he's not necessarily saying it through himself. He's giving the source of David, which the scribes
Right.
have to acknowledge the David, King David. They can't say King David was a liar, King David was
Right.
wrong.
Yeah.
Or they can tell Jesus, you're blasphemy, you're a liar.
But
But
they
since
can't tell
he's,
David.
yeah, you can't do it to David. So Jesus gives the source of David that shuts them
Wow.
down, saying, "How is he the son if David calls him Yehovah? You can't."
Wow.
And that's not. And so they, what are they going to say? They can't accuse David of blasphemy and liar. They can't because then everything falls apart for them. So
Listen,
that's what's key.
I want to tell everybody that's watching, if you're having trouble with this, because brother, there could be some people having trouble with this.
Yeah,
If you're having trouble with this, that's great. Go back, follow what Dr. Garza is presenting here, and do your own research.
yes,
Don't believe it because Dr. Garza has spent decades, working up and earning a PhD and actually going to do a PhD a thesis on this. But go back and search these things out for yourself. And I think that's important because look, there's so many people that teach. There's so many people, and the Bible says there should be few teachers.
yeah,
There's so many people that teach, and they're parroting. Brother, I did it. I was a pastor from 2000 to 2004, and was an evangelist years ago. I had the evangelist hair back then and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the stuff, brother, that I taught and preached were things that I parroted
yep,
from other ministers, from other professors, and different things like that I had learned. And you know what? I came to find out that some of those things were very incorrect, and they were traditions that had been taught by men. And that's all we're
right.
talking about tonight is we have some traditions that were taught by men that had rejected Yeshua as Messiah. And around 900 AD, they changed one vowel in Psalms 110, verse 1, to make it mean something completely different.
And I was in your shoes even early on in my Christian faith, my 20s to early 30s. I was parroting, mimicking things. Scholars would say, "Oh, even Trinitarian scholars, oh well, yes, the Trinity's not in the Old Testament; it's only found in the New. If you do
Right.
this," and I'm thinking, wait a minute, and that did not sit right with me.
Mm.
I'm thinking, wait a minute, there has to, if God is triune, if there is God appearing in the forms that we talk that we claim in the New Testament, then we should see evidence of that, not just little tidbits here and there. There's just no way. And I had to step out of the tradition of the parroting of the same concept. Says, no, I'm not satisfied with that. And I went, like I showed you, through the book of Genesis on finding in the Hebrew where these things were not so, that there was an idea of a persons of God appearing all throughout the Hebrew scriptures from Genesis as the foundation of the first 20 chapters all the way through, till we get to the New Testament. That was from the Hebrew, which most scholars I found out did not really read the Hebrew that well. They didn't study it. They were looking at the Septuagint that changes the plural to singulars, so that wasn't there, or they looked at other things, and that's what like you said, I had to step out of that and say that doesn't sit right with me. I need to
Right.
look at that for myself and not just keep repeating what I've been told.
That's and look, and that takes guts because then you're going against the grain.
Yeah,
Uh, you can lose a lot of friends. I know
I have.
when
Yeah,
I stopped when I stopped teaching certain things that I taught, brother. Look, I got dropped like a hot potato.
yeah,
I no longer got all the invites to go preach and teach at a lot of churches because of I stopped espousing to some of those things. So thank you
yeah.
for thank you for being bold enough to search out your own faith, to search out.
Even going against well-known Semitic scholars like Dr. Michael Brown, very well-known Semitic scholar, good
Right.
friend of mine. I've talked to him. He's endorsed one of my books. I talked to him about, like I told you before, Genesis 18. He has a different view of it. He
Sure.
thinks it's Yehovah and two angels. And I've talked about that. And the difference between him and I in our position is that he's holding on to more Jewish tradition, or Christian Jewish
Right.
tradition later on. And I'm saying, look, that's not what the text says. And he simply says, yes, I see how you're translating that. I don't have a problem with that. but he's going to hold on to more of the traditional view of it rather than saying
Mhm.
what does the text say. And that's why me and him, we different. People say, well, look at Michael Brown, he doesn't agree with you, he's a Semitic scholar. I say I agree, and that bothers me because it's used against me. I say, look, I'm just exegeting the text, I'm playing it out, and I've talked to Dr. Michael Brown about this word for word on his radio show. We've talked on the phone, email, and he doesn't say it can't be. He just simply says that's not his position. But he sees where the Targum, the Targum agrees with me in certain areas. He sees where I'm coming from, just like Dr. Benjamin Sommer, which you pointed out the last time.
Right.
He agrees with that. My position that it could, it's a fluidity of God appearing as three men, Jehovah as three men. So I get you because people will point to Christian scholars who haven't done that much work into it, but hold to more traditional point of Christian text of interpretation. But that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really enjoy trying to get back to what the text actually says.
Right.
Because
Right.
listen, we are all guilty of looking at things through a bias lens, and
Sure.
it takes effort to not look at things through a bias.
Yes.
I'm loving what you're doing here because you're actually going back and look, you've opened up the Greek, you've opened up the Hebrew, the Aramaic, and the Syriac. You've opened up all these different witnesses to
Yeah.
this one verse,
Yeah.
and going into it, you're hoping. I'm sure you're brother, you're a self-professed Trinitarian. You're hoping that this says it a certain way, but
Yeah.
it could have said it completely different, and bam, there you go. But it
And
doesn't.
that exactly, and that's why I look at it and say, I'm going to look at all 150 Psalms. I'm going to go verse by verse and check out all the different places. I do not, Adonai doesn't exist in there. All we find is Adonai, Yehovah in the Greek Septuagint and the Aramaic. They're all mixed with each other in agreement. Nowhere do we find Adonai except in one place that was put by the scribes. And that goes with even with the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that I have. When I
Mm,
found those and I discovered those, my fear was, are they going to affirm Jesus as Jewish copyist, as
right.
as Yehovah, as Adonai? I go, what if they don't? What if none of these manuscripts have it? Then I
Yeah.
got to think, okay, what were they thinking? And lo and behold, they did. They called him. No one can confess Jesus is Yehovah except by the Spirit. They called him Adonai in there. They used a tetragrammaton for him. I mean, all throughout the different passages, they affirmed who he was in every single manuscript that I have of the New Testament in Hebrew, from the earliest to the latest, all affirm the same tradition that we believed as Christians early on and so forth, that Jesus is Adonai Yehovah, even in these Hebrew copies. So that's was huge to me. Like, wow, because
Yeah.
I was on the other side thinking, what if they did not?
Yeah.
But affirm, no. They all I posted these manuscripts on different pages, but they do even polemic works, which is interesting. Polemic
Mm,
works, which was Jews writing against other Jewish believers who believed in Yeshua Jesus as a Messiah. In their polemic works, they accuse these Jewish believers as believing in Hebrew heretical books, which is the Gospels and New Testament in Hebrew. They criticize them for believing Jesus is God in the flesh and the Trinity, the three powers. They mention these things in their
right.
polemic works as Jewish believers. So this was in Jewish communities already established even during the time of these Hebrew manuscripts being written down and put together.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
not it's not invented.
Oh, I love it, brother. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. I know that we have Project Truth Ministries come on our program, and they've been doing a lot of study into the Coaching Hebrew
Hmm.
Gospels, and I can't remember. I was trying to pull it up real quick, but I know in Matthew 7 in the coaching, where it talks about Yeshua says, not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord. If I remember right, I'll try to look this up while
Hmm.
we're doing this program, but I believe it's in the Hebrew. It goes, not everyone says unto me, and when it goes to say Lord, Lord, it actually switches to that Aramaic form I believe it's either Mari or Maria, and I'll look that up while we're talking. But
Yeah.
every, all of these Hebrew New Testament documents seem to point that Yeshua is Jehovah. It's very
Yeah.
fascinating.
Another a Hebrew manuscript I have, I gotta get the name off the top of my head. It's one of the first ones I'm looking at. Has Adonai Adonai.
Mm,
So it uses the Adonai, which is Mari. Mari is Adonai as well.
right.
So it can go either way. But so the Hebrew ones that have, well, even without the vowel points, like I said, could be read as Adonai.
Wow.
So like I said, these manuscripts, but even in some of the clearest ones, First Corinthians, no one can say Jesus is Lord, or in this case, Yehovah or Adonai or Ahadon. These are titles only given to God in the Old Testament, affirming that Jesus is that no one can say that unless by the Spirit. So
Mari, Mari is what it says. And
yeah, Marima, which is Adonai Adonai as well. It can be used that way,
yeah, yeah.
and we have Hebrew manuscripts that I have
Wow.
as Adonai Adonai with the vowel pointings.
Yeah, I'm finding it more and more compelling, brother, that the New Testament is saying that He is Jehovah all the
Yeah.
way through. We have just been kind of kind of brainwashed into another thing just because it's written in Greek. So very interesting. All right, brother.
Exactly.
I've been kind of rabbiting here for you. Okay.
Not a problem.
There-
This is more of the conclusion. Now that we've looked at the Psalms, we've looked at the words of Jesus claiming to be Yehovah through the mouth of David. We look at other things that we have to now consider that Yehovah God has come in the flesh. Other verses to confirm what we call the incarnation, which if you pull up, if you click on, we have First John 1, which everyone knows the Word was with God or next to God, and that's in the Hebrew. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. The Word became flesh. All things created by Him and through Him. Philippians is, I mean, people I think undercut the Philippians that Messiah Jesus was existing in the form of God, taking the form of a servant, the same Greek word for morphe there, and being found in the fashion as a human. So these
Hmm.
words form twice as he was in the form of God, taking the
Mhm.
form of a servant. Now the Hebrew word for servant as well as in the Greek always displays a servant as being something of obedient or in worship or obedience to someone else. So, of course, when Jesus speaks about the Father, the Creator, or God, he's speaking this as the servant Messiah, who that's who what
Right.
he became, a servant to the Father. Therefore, everything was given to the Father. So that's why Jesus said, I can do nothing of my own accord except what the Father shows me. But he says, I and the Father, we are one. But he's obedient to the Father. This is what people forget because they like to point to the human side, the human side of Jesus. Oh, Jesus said he has a God. He has it. Well, yes, he became a servant. The servant
Right.
Messiah is going to have a God because that's a human form, a fashion, but he
Mhm.
existed in the form of God prior,
Yep.
and he took the form, same word, of a servant, being fashioned as a man. Therefore, he's going to have the same things that we have. That's why he said he could be tempted as we were but not sin.
Right.
He can call the Father God. He can call reference says his God because he's speaking as the Messiah, the servant, the one who. Look up the word in Greek and Hebrew. It's being a servant or obedient and total subjection to somebody else, and that's what Jesus was. He emptied himself of that form that he had as God, became a form of a servant, and that's why we see him making those claims about between him and God relationship
Right.
that people point to, but they ignore all the other deifications of him saying, "I'm Lord of the Sabbath," or "I'm
Right.
all the different areas of Lord of the Sabbath and greater than the temple has come and I'm here and all these illusions and all these things that they understood him saying that he was more than just the son of David. Even we just saw here in Matthew 22 where he directly references David as being the Messiah Yehovah.
Mm.
So here we have John 8, same thing. I, Jesus, have come down from heaven to do the will of my Father. So he had come down from heaven. He was in heaven, which is Philippians. And of course, the second man referring to Jesus is God from heaven. We have a Hebrew manuscript that reads that way. The second man,
Mm.
who is God. It uses the word Elohim from heaven in
Wow.
that manuscript. So we have a Hebrew manuscript that affirms it. We have Hebrew manuscripts that affirm everything we've talked about, as well as in these passages, I have come down from heaven. He became a servant. These are incarnation. These are passages where we show Jesus speaks himself in the human way and is in the divine way. Because he existed prior. So
Wow.
yeah,
I tell you, brother, it is such a slam dunk for what you're presenting here tonight. And um, I'll be honest, when you first mentioned Psalms 110, verse 1, I immediately went to the Masoretic text, brother. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
what are we gonna be talking about? Because in the Masoretic text it says Yehovah, then it says Adoni,
Hmm.
or Adon, depending on which Bible
Yeah, I
software
delete.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
but very interesting tonight, and yeah, so and I like something. One of our listeners here, Karen C says he does say he comes in the name of the Father, so it's obvious that messianic verses is Yeshua because inside the word, the very Hebrew word Yeshua is the name of Jehovah.
Right,
So
exactly.
I love
Yehovah delivers and saves. Yes, and he says, "I have come down from heaven to do the will of my Father."
it. Yeah,
Now,
beautiful.
now here's the interesting thing. I want to point this out because
Okay,
many people, Unitarians mainly, like to advocate the word Father.
right.
Oh, God the Father, God's only one person, God the Father, God the Father. And here's the interesting part. And again, this is go back to just doing your diligent research. How many times is the word Father used in the Hebrew Bible directed towards God? Do you
I
have
mean,
any idea?
I think it's two or three. Is
Yep.
that right?
What from Genesis on to Malachi, a whole text referring to God, the God of Israel, to either personally or a
Okay.
way of. How many times is he referred to as God? How many did you
I was thinking two or three, but not.
say? Actually,
I'm
it's a little more than that.
okay.
It's 15 times,
15. Okay.
15, and
Wow.
about close to half of that is in relation to him being the creator,
Okay.
as well as God or creator over the people and so forth. It's first found in Deuteronomy, the first time applied to God as the creator. He is our father, which that
Right.
word in Hebrew, avi or av, the root
Right.
word, simply refers to the originator, creator of life, someone who gave life. He's not talking literal father like the
Right.
Mormons would believe, or someone where a
Yeah.
father becomes. No, he's saying I gave you life. I am your father. I'm your see because father in English is very abstract.
Right.
It's very abstract. Concrete Hebrew means originator, the creator of life. So when we they reference the father, Avi, it's in reference to being the creator. This is why in Isaiah the Messiah is called Aviad, the originator of eternity, the creator of eternity. He's given the title Avi, Father, because the word in ancient Semitic Hebrew references as the originator, the creator of life. So it's not, you have 15 times that
Mm.
he's referenced that way, and it's not in every book of the Bible. Therefore, he's always only referenced as Yehovah, Adonai, or Elohim. And that is it, or El, even El, the singular form. But
Mm.
again, it is not, Avi is not his given name, like a lot of Unitarians say, well, he's the Father.
Right.
That's not how he was understood from the Hebrew Scriptures.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking to him as a creator, yes, but not as a person like you would say Yehovah or Adonai or even
So, brother,
Elohim.
are you saying? I'm just curious because I've had some people come on
Mhm.
before and talk about this from a couple different ways. Are you suggesting that every time that we see Yehovah, most people normally think of the Father, but
Yes,
it's not specifically saying uh, 15 times it's saying that that's the Father, but you're saying that it could be referring to the Son, correct?
it could. Well, it's referring to the person of. See, here's the thing: the word Father, again, as it's used, it's not even in connection with Yehovah. It's used in like, let me give an example here, and I'll show you a place where we have it. Um, First time Deuteronomy, is he not your father? It's basically your creator, originator, who created you. So avecha in Hebrew simply means, is he not your creator, your originator? Who created you? Who created you? So it's speaking about Yehovah, but again, this word Father is applied also to the Messiah. So when you're saying Yehovah, let me put it this way. I recently put out a paper. Remember the golden calf in Exodus, right? Where they formed
Right.
the golden calf. Okay. That golden calf represented Yehovah.
Right.
That single, because Aaron said, we will give a feast to Yehovah.
Right.
And that golden calf represented, because in ancient Semitic times, the calf, represented a specific deity or even gods, that gods wouldn't
Mhm.
would be habit. So what do the people of Israel say? These are our Elohim. These are our gods.
Right.
What is it? It's a single golden calf representing Yehovah, but yet it is the plural Elohim that they are worshiping.
Mm.
And Aaron says, we will make a feast. So they weren't committing idolatry. What they were doing is the second commandment, saying you created an idol for Yehovah, which you should not have done, a graven image, which you should not have done. But you're still using that to identify Yehovah as an object.
Wow.
So the Yehovah is used singularly as representing the image, but the persons is plural, as in those gods, as in Elohim plural. These are your Elohim, or these are your God. So
Wow.
the understanding of singular plural existed in ancient Hebrew Israelite mind, that a single object like the golden calf that represents Yehovah is also Elohim, the plural, because that's what's been revealed to them as the word, the messenger we talked about before, in Yehovah himself. And that's why they use it as a plural. They were not committing idolatry by saying foreign gods, because Aaron made it clear that this represented Yahweh, who they were going to Yehovah, because they were going to make a feast to him the
Right.
next day, and that this golden calf represented Yehovah, singular, but yet it was the plural Elohim they were saying led us out of the land of Egypt.
Very interesting.
So that's what the ancient Semitic people, they understood the singular plural usages of what it meant to be singular Yehovah and plural Elohim as the persons being revealed. And this is clear from we get from Genesis on to Exodus, as I mentioned. That is understood, is not foreign to them. Someone said, "Well, it's foreign. How do they understand?" No, they understood it even when they created that golden calf as Yehovah, as Elohim, the persons who led them out of Egypt, the God, so to speak, in that respect.
I really enjoyed when you were on last time how you brought up not only that you have said, Dr. Al Garza has said, but also Dr. Nehemiah Gordon has said
Mm-hmm.
the original literal understanding of Elohim and Adonai are they are God,
Right.
they are Lord. I find that very fascinating, and
Yeah,
I
because they don't have s's.
right.
So when they take a plural noun and they want to make it, when they take a singular noun like aloha and they want to make it plural, they got to put
Hmm,
they at the end. So that makes it plural. It's the suffix.
wow.
It's not s. So it's they are Eloah. They are God, or the
Yeah.
possessive form. They are my Lord.
Yeah.
And this is the plural sing. That's what it's even in the language, like you just said. It's in the language of third person plural suffixes attached to singular nouns. They, which would then turn the singular into plural. We use s's and we get a bad concept of that with gods. We think gods like individuals, like the Greek gods. You got the Zeus and
Right.
Hercules and all these people. Those are that's not in the mind of an Israelite. That's why I said the golden calf is a prime example of a singular image representing Yehovah, but the plural Elohim, they Eloah, they are God. They led us out of Egypt, which
Wow.
represented by Yehovah as the calf as an image. So they
You know, and I,
violated, yeah,
I have not heard that tonight until you brought that out tonight. Here's another point, brother, that I love you, and I'm going to go back and take what you just said. I'm going to go back and look it up. I'm going to
yeah,
go back and be a good Berean and
yes,
say, wow, because you know what that I've always thought of it. They were committing idolatry. You know, they come down. You know, Moses. You know, they're on their honeymoon night, and there they go. They're breaking the commandments. And you know, Moses. I love the Mel Brooks version better than Cecil B. DeMille. He comes down with three tablets, and
yeah.
he drops one of them. But yeah, but this it's fascinating because you're saying it's not that they were committing idolatry. They were making a graven image.
Right, because remember that's what Aaron says that
Mm.
now after they created it, we will have a feast to Yehovah.
Well,
To
yeah.
Yehovah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't to these foreign gods. It was because
Okay.
this represented Yehovah, which is a
Wow.
violation of the second commandment. Do not make any graven images of, because in ancient Israel, and whether the Uritic and the Canaanites,
Wow.
they would the gold a calf or a calf and it
Mhm.
would have a strength, vitality
Right.
represented, and it did represent gods and encapsulating that image. So they came out of Egypt, understanding even in Egypt the calf how it represented.
Like they had
But they,
forests, they had different gods.
yeah,
Even in, like in Canaanite culture, they have Bashan, which was
yes.
represented by bulls. So yeah,
Yes,
very
and so yeah, so this represented Yehovah because that's what Aaron said. Tomorrow we feast to Yehovah. That image they created so they
fascinating.
can have an image of Yehovah there for them, but it was the plural Elohim that led them out of Egypt. Even God said when He told
Hmm.
Moses, "You better go down because they have created this image, and they are saying these are their Elohim that they created." So even He said, "You better go down because this is what they're doing. They're creating this image of a calf." This was a violation of the second commandment that he given Moses: do not make any graven images. This was not foreign gods. because this is not Aaron. Said clearly this was Yehovah that they're going to feast to as the image of the calf.
And again, that was one of the main things that Yah told them over and over:
Hmm.
don't worship me, don't take on the ways of the pagan to worship me. How did
Yes.
the pagans worship them? Their gods, well, with this golden calf was their
Yeah,
supreme.
creating images. Yeah, creating images in him and all this. And this is
Wow.
why just the next chapter over, if you remember from last time, the next two chapters over, God speaks to Moses as his persons, his faces that he will
Mm,
send before him, and that no one can see my persons. Again,
yeah,
God is speaking of his plural persons who have gone out, who they cannot see and
yeah.
live. So it goes back to them understanding the singular and plural forms of Yehovah to Elohim and Adonai. That's why it fits perfectly that this is the triune appearing, but from Genesis on, and we see even through Exodus, where even God affirming His persons that appeared, and we find that all throughout Genesis.
Wow, fascinating, brother. All right, gonna get you back over here to
Yep.
your.
Go to the next slide. Okay, so we also have First Kings, the translation, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? It's rhetorical. It's affirming yes. Behold, the heaven and the heavens of heavens cannot contain you. You much how much less this house I have built. Again, this is from go to the next passage from Solomon. Um, for the Targum reads, for who has supposed and who has imagined that in truth Jehovah has desired to cause his divine presence to dwell among the children of men and who dwell on the earth. It's explaining First Kings in Hebrew as saying that where it says, "But will God indeed dwell on the earth?" Or it says, "Would it not Yehovah has desired to cause His divine presence, which we saw earlier in the other passage, to dwell among the children of men who dwell on the earth? Behold, the heavens of the heavens are not able to contain the glory. How much less this house which I have built." So even the Aramaic Targum, giving you explain, this is His divine presence that will dwell on the earth. This is God's uh, desire that He will dwell with man. His divine presence, which we know as the Word who became flesh, the one who existed in the form of God and took on the form of a servant, who he says mentioned all of Jesus, who I have come down from heaven. He was with the Father from the beginning of creation, even in the prayer with the glory he had with him. The divine presence is going to dwell. This is how the Targum interpreted it. So, will God dwell on the earth?
Mm,
Yes, it's rhetorical, and
right.
it's Yehovah has desired to cause His divine presence to dwell
Mm,
among the children.
wow.
So this is Yehovah speaking clearly that yes, in First Kings, that's what you get. God will dwell on the earth, and it will be His divine presence who will be there. And then Isaiah 9:6, for us a child is born, to us a son is given, the government shall rest upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Father of Eternity, the Prince of Peace. How does the Targum understand this? With the Aviad. Click the next one. We have, for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and he shall accept the Torah upon himself to keep it, and his name is called from before the
Mm,
world, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, who lives forever, the Messiah, in whose days of peace shall increase upon us. That's the Targum. So this Targum, the Targum affirms this is the Messiah who will keep, who shall accept the Torah upon himself to keep it, and those are his names that we have talked about. And one of them is from the Hebrew, the Father of Eternity, the Avi, the
I
creator, the
really like
originator.
that.
Yeah.
I really like how this Targum, instead of saying the government shall be upon his shoulder, he shall accept the Torah upon
Upon
himself.
himself to keep it, yes, and his name shall
That
be
is a
called from before.
wonderful explanation of what does it mean, and the government shall be an opponent. The government, that's God, that's God's law. It's
Yes,
not
that
talking about
it.
the United States law and that
Nope.
I can't drive 55 and all that kind of mess. This is talking about God's law.
The theocracy of God's
Yes,
commandments, His law, that originated with the people
wow,
before they had a king.
yeah,
This is what the Messiah upon himself will keep it, and this is God's teachings and commandments, and that's exact instructions for, and that's what He will keep.
that's amazing. I've not seen that before with this Aramaic law. This is all. Oh wow,
And at the end,
oh wow, brother. I'm telling you what, this has been just fabulous. I have bro, I don't know how you can make a clearer case. Uh,
yeah,
it is very very compelling. And I'm always open to someone. If you guys have some things in the comments, maybe someone's watching this later and you've gone back and watched this times, and you're like, yeah, but, and throw the yeah buts in there.
yeah.
I'd like to see those. But this is fascinating, brother.
Yeah.
I again, you've opened up all the different sources that we have, that we currently have, right? And
Yes.
you're saying not only is it in the Greek Septuagint, not only is it in the Peshitta, not only is it in the Targums, it's also in some first, second, third, fourth, fifth century Hebrew Old Testament writings. Also, we have a church father I think from the 700s is what you said,
800s. Yeah, 800s, ninth
800s,
century. Yeah.
800s, and then we have New Testament Hebrew writings that affirm this very same thing all the way through. And I'm telling you what, it is fascinating to see all of these. It's not just one or two, it's not even one or two witnesses. It is multiple upon
Yeah.
multiple witnesses saying the same exact thing. Now, what we have, brother, because I know we'll have some people that'll disagree with this,
Sure.
just because maybe they don't like my eyebrows or they don't like something that we do here on
Yeah.
the program, or maybe they well, Dr. Garza is a pronounced Trinitarian, so of course he's going to view everything from that lens. No, you have gone out of your way to look at these other witnesses, and the only witness that we have that really says different is the Masoretic, and
Right.
it's one of the very later references, and they clearly state that they are what we would call today anti-missionary. They are
Right.
trying to do everything they can to say that Yeshua is not Lord in any
Right.
capacity. Yeah, they think he's a false prophet. They think all kinds of things, and
Yes.
so yeah, so very very fascinating. And I let me ask
And
you this.
that's why I wanted to
Go ahead.
just to clarify. I don't want to give interpretation. I'm just giving you the data, the what's
Yeah,
in the text from the languages, what's there. And I say everybody check it out. Go through 150 psalms, do the research, check for yourselves. Why is it Adoni? What do the Jewish
mhm,
Masoretes believe it to be or interpret it to be? You're going to find that it's not referencing the Messiah in the earliest traditions of their beliefs. So therefore,
yeah,
they were refuting Christianity. And again, just look at the languages. Jesus is clearly saying that David called the Messiah Yehovah,
mm,
Maria in the Aramaic, the Syriac Aramaic, as well as in the Greek when it comes to the Psalms. Now, I'm not
mm,
taking a word dictionary. I don't want people to. This is common. They'll look up the Greek word kurios. Oh, well, it doesn't just mean Yahweh, just or Yehovah. It means Lord and Malak. Yeah,
right,
and that's they missed the whole point. I'm
yeah,
saying in the book of Psalms, all 150, you're not going to find the human form of kurios and any grammatical form of kuria and kurio for anybody other than Yehovah Elohim Adonai. Or not even Elohim, just Yehovah and Adonai. Elohim
right,
is theos, but different word. But for that word that Jesus is using in every form is only found David only writing about Yehovah Adonai and Elohim. That's it. So you're never going to find in the Psalms anything different as this Adonai. It doesn't exist. Even La Adonai, La Yehovah Zer, you're not going to find it. It's either La Adonai or La Yehovah. That's it.
do you have any recommendations? Because we probably have a lot of people watching us that are not on the PhD track
Mhm.
and trying to really do a deep dive. Most of our New Old Testament translations that we have are based off the Masoretic. Do
Typically,
you
yeah.
recommend any particular translation that a viewer might be able watching and say, "Hey, I'd like to read something that's not the Masoretic." Are there some Old Testament translations that are readily available to people for that would be maybe out of a different thing?
I mean, to be honest with you, the only one that I actually had any I get more of the Jewish context
Hmm.
is the New Jerusalem version.
Okay.
It keeps all of the Hebrew names in there. It uses the Tetragrammaton. It uses Adonai in there. Now, if you look up certain passages in whether in Psalms, it's going to let me pull it up here because sometimes certain translations still follow it. Now, this one doesn't say. This one does use the capital L and then the small ord, which is reference for Adonai. So
Okay.
it says Yehovah and it has Yehovah in Yod He Vav He. says to my Lord, and it is Adonai. So,
Wow.
and so it is referencing, now if it had a lowercase l, that would mean Adoni.
Out of me. Right.
Yeah, so this one has a full capital L, just like in verse 5. It has the same full capital L, which is Adonai as well. And actually, verse 5 does put Adonai, is at your right hand, in
Uh-huh.
verse 5. But in the very first one, it uses Lord capital L, which represents
I
Adonai.
don't know.
They just
Wow.
didn't write it in there. So they didn't write small l either, but they
Yeah.
recognized that this is debatable
Debatable.
among
Right.
scholar.
Yeah.
Right now, people have called in and said, "Why are you using the capital L? That's not for Adoni. You need to change the
Right.
lowercase L because they're following the Masoretic tradition." And like I said,
Hmm.
if you want to follow that tradition, granted, go ahead, but it is not about the Messiah. You're going to have to reject the true meaning of the text as if you're going to keep the Jewish tradition.
So,
So again, it's Adonai or Yehovah.
which translation was that again, brother?
That is the New Jerusalem version, and it has a. They have it in this color. They have it in black. It's the NJV New Jerusalem version. You
Okay.
can find it on. It's a great version. I enjoy if you want to stay closer to the Jewish sort. The Jewish. It has all the titles of the letters in Hebrew as well as written out
Okay.
in English. So it
Is
and
that,
it
is that
contains.
just the Tanakh, or is there
No, it's
also?
it's New Testament, Old Testament.
Okay.
It's a
Sure.
complete Bible, and it uses Yeshua. It doesn't use Jesus. It uses Yeshua.
We'll
It might
found a new.
yeah,
I have to
it'll
look.
give some Hebrew words in there. It'll say Ruach Hakodesh for the
Yeah.
Spirit, but it's a
Yeah.
good translation. It comes off a very recognized translation itself, and they just kept true to the Jewish under. So for more of a Jewish reader or someone who
Yeah.
wants to stay close to the Jewish text of what would have been spoken at that time. So the NJV, I like to use that if I'm doing certain studies with the Hebrew words and
Yes.
connections as well.
I tell you, every time my wife and I read several chapters a night, depending on what. If we're in the Old Testament, we usually read 4 chapters. We're in the New Testament, we read two, just to slow it down a little bit, so
Yeah,
we don't go through it so fast. But we always, when we get done, we'll buy a new translation, and then and each one of us will buy a different translation. So we're constantly getting some of these new. So I
yeah.
found I'm going to be getting this one, and then you can something
Wow. So
else.
we're kind of with the same one.
It's a good
Awesome.
translation as far as like I said, keeping closer to the Jewish meanings and words.
Yeah, I like
It's
that.
really
I
good.
like. Well,
Yeah,
brother, I'm telling you what, this has been to me a very compelling case.
yeah,
I would encourage our brothers and sisters that are watching this. Even look, even if you agree with all of it, which I'm right on the surface, brother. I'm there. I'm still going to go back and watch this again, so I can really fine tune and really dive into this for myself, because that we look. Uh, when I stand before Yah, I can't say, well, Dr. Garza said that,
exactly.
that's not going to mean anything. God's going to be like,
Right.
yeah, okay, but this is you we're talking about,
Right,
right?
right. And that's
So
why I made it clear. I stress this every
yeah,
time. I'm not trying to interpret the text. I'm trying to
yeah,
give you the data, the sources. Check it
yeah,
out for yourselves. Go through it. Draw your
beautiful.
own conclusions. But for me, it's clear as day how I. If you ask me how do I understand it by the evidence, I'm going to tell you that's what Jesus said. And if when I trace it back to languages, that's
Wow.
what he was saying based upon the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Syriac Aramaic. There's no way around it before quoting Psalms, and I gave the data for that. So check it out for themselves. I'm wholeheartedly open to that because this is what my dissertation is going to be for the next 4 years is on this text in more depth.
Wow. I can't wait to dive into the expanded version of all this,
Yeah,
brother. That's going to be good.
yeah. You can
Hey,
get you can get the shorter version. My master's thesis. It's at my academia page. You can download. Also, I have it in my book. Jesus is Lord.
okay.
Part of my master's thesis is in there. That's when that Dr. Brown endorsed when I presented him with the same with my master's thesis. So you can find those for free. It's a condensed version, but it's going to be my obviously my next PhD will be a very 300 or 400 pages on this very topic.
Wow, fascinating. I just love that. Dr. Garza, thank you so much for coming on tonight. This has been such a blessing. Every time you come on, you just present things so clearly, and you back things up, and I love it. And you're not going to, well, this scholar says this. You're going to the source,
Yeah,
which makes all the difference in the world to me. And I'm very excited about it. I hope that we'll have you back on
appreciate it.
soon. And this man, I'm telling you what, this was fa- I'm I. Hmm, Oh, man, as soon as we get done with this tonight, I'm
Yeah,
rewinding and going right
yeah,
back
yeah.
and watching this again because it's such a compelling case.
Yeah, and I thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to present it as well. I appreciate that because, like I said, this is going to be my next 4 years of doing research on this. But I have other things. I'm still going to do the translation. I'm still going through acts, but most of my time I'll be doing this for my next 4 years. But yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me come up and present it as that way. I
Well,
appreciate it.
brother, thank you so much, guys. Go check out Dr. Garza's info page, dralgarza.info. All of his two YouTube sites are there. His academia site, you can find all of his books. You can find all kinds of information. And listen, this is a wealth of information that's here tonight. Guys, go back, share this out, share this video out, and look, Dr. Garza, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This has been just wonderful. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time taking out with us tonight, and we look forward to having you back on very soon.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Blessings. Thank you.
All right, brother. Hang on just 1 second. We're going to close out the program, and I'll be right back with you, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Miranda, that was so good.
Yes. I
You
love
were
that.
you were quiet tonight.
I was.
You're just soaking things in.
I was.
I tell you what, it was so good, guys. Listen, go back and watch this tonight. Watch this again, guys, and be a good Berean. Don't believe it just because somebody has a doctorate. Listen, that's a lot of study, a lot of work to go into to get a doctorate. But even Dr. Garza said, I've had to go outside of what fellow PhD holders have said to go back to these original sources and break from tradition in
Yeah.
looking at some of these things.
Yeah.
Be that brave, guys. Be that brave. Oh, thank you, Al, for being honest. Al says April Lockhart was first in comments earlier, so uh, YouTube had taken her comment off. So thank you for being honest about that, brother. We will give a double first comments out tonight for you being so honest. But guys, listen, we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful. We look forward to Wednesday night. We're going to be having Catherine Kate Jones on talking about her book, and she's a friend with Janice Baca.
Hmm.
She has a very similar story of what happened on their at the wedding on the real Mount Sinai.